We're going to be talking about that land out beyond the rainbow for the next few weeks here. So we'll leave these rainbows from our wedding. Mostly these are Caitlin's doing. This is a sermon which I've avoided for a long time. I've been thinking about gender as one of the fundamental experiences of being human, and certainly a major aspect of my experience of being human for as long as I can remember, really. And I've never preached about it. And so the executive committee, after the Beyond Categorical Thinking workshop many of you attended last December, asked me if I would consider preaching about it. So thanks, I guess. I'm guessing that most of you here in this room grew up being told, living with the story, without even really a lot of room to question it or reason to, that gender was a black and white experience. Gender was boy or girl, and you got what you got, and you don't get upset, or however the expression goes. And of course, we know here in our liberal California subculture, things have changed in this last generation or so, changed quickly and dramatically. My first language that I got for that was at a youth conference, one of our Young Religious Unitarian Universalist youth conferences as a teenager, when the trainers came in and offered a workshop. They were coming from some radical organization working on helping to broaden our culture of welcome for LGBTQ folk especially. And they came in with a workshop and said, well, let's break down these three different categories. Let's talk about gender, which they said is between your ears, and sex, which is between your legs, and sexuality, which is what you do with it. And I thought that was a beautiful, simple paradigm. It turns out even that's a little, too simple to describe it all. They had us, with each of those categories, brainstorm words that you would put under each of those labels. So with gender, you might have words that we use like feminine and masculine, or tomboy, or sissy, or all those sorts of words. We might talk about our experience of gender, that experience that's cultural and between the ears. And then sex, we'd talk about words like male and female, these more biological categories. And this is where, again, that model gets even too simple, because we know now that our experience of chromosomal biological gender, sex, is way beyond a binary, right? That you can have not just XX or XY chromosomes, but XXY, XYY, single X, triple X. You can have a whole variety, right? People have these wide spectrum of gender experiences. It's not just black and white. And see, I'm not even using the words right, because that would be sex experiences in the vocabulary I was just trying. It's not just black and white. It's not even shades of gray. It's a wild Technicolor dreambox somewhere over the rainbow. That's true. And thousands of years of dominant cultures and some of the realities about the mechanics of human reproduction tell us there's also something true in that binary conception. Is there anything to say about sex or gender that doesn't leave some people out? I don't know. So I'll share a few of my stories. I shared last month one about my first coming to realize there was some shame associated with expressing outside of the male norm of gender experience. I talked about dancing in a tutu and the video of that, and realizing some years later, so the video was when I was 3 or 4, and by 6 or 7 watching it, I knew that I should be ashamed looking at myself in that experience. I remember McDonald's toys. Did you ever get McDonald's Happy Meal toys? I don't know how long that went back, but McDonald's Happy Meal toys that were gendered, and which you had to decide at one era whether you wanted the little ballerina dolls that had all sorts of different dresses and hairdos, and they were fun and interesting, or the monster trucks. And I wanted the ballerina butthead dolls. I had to call them the ballerina butthead dolls because I needed a little distance from them. And I'm not sure how much it was me and how much it was the conversation I was having with my mom about it, because she was the intermediary, of course, between me and the Happy Meal toy. I know that that conversation, me and one of my moms, was the place where I was trying to figure this whole weird gender mess out for years and years and years. I think we do all have that conversation with our parents. That's a primary location of our gendered experience, whatever that might be. Is this, how do I understand my own gender in relationship to the gender of those who I'm getting to see most intimately? But the codes about how to behave are enforced, in my experience, primarily not at home, but out in the world. Some people, I think, get a more enforcement at home, but out in the world, especially at the school bathroom. That's the site of enforcement on gendered behavior. At least it was for me. But because of this strange circumstance I was in, growing up a boy in a household with 2 moms, I knew it was a choice whether to conform or not to these roles that were being enforced at school. I knew it was a choice, and I also knew in that conversation that is beyond words, the conversation I was having with my mom by watching and hearing and feeling her, I knew it was dangerous. And I know many of you know this story, but for those who don't, her dad was murdered because of his sexuality, because he stepped out of those gender norms. And so I got transmitted to me this clarity: it is dangerous. It's a choice. But to reject what has been prescribed for you is dangerous. But I was growing up in Berkeley, and it was the 90s, and so by the time middle school rolled around and they sent home the letter about Career Day was the time when we were going to learn about all the jobs that you could do, and there'd be people from, who had real jobs, I guess, besides teachers, coming in and showing about their real jobs. And so we were to dress up. This was the instruction in the letter for Career Day: dress up. And they give examples of specifically how to dress up, to wear, button-down shirts and ties, a skirt or a dress. And I thought, oh, well, here's the opportunity. I've been invited. And mostly out of my sense of, I just had to point out the ridiculousness of this whole thing. I put on a skirt and wore it to my Career Day in middle school. And it was amazing to read how they were reading me. What did it mean? I did it again at graduation. I remember even still now, I can feel the nervousness, the panic in my chest, showing up to graduation, hiding. I had it kind of tucked away. I wanted it to be this reveal. I couldn't even tell my parents about it. It was too that shame, that humiliation of the ballerina dress, the tutu was still there. And so I did. I tucked it into some pants or something. I don't know how I did it. And then I took them off I took the pants over the dress off in line to go to graduation, graduated in my skirt. And I remember, again, this wide range of reactions, all the ideas people had about what it meant, what I was trying to say, or who I was, or from pride to fear. And it is the truth that I started to learn then and has played out again and again in my life, that how we present ourselves, the ways that we show up in this corporeal, relational reality, well, it influences how people will treat us. People respond and react differently. And because all of us are driven by a biological need, a safety need to belong, the most painful experiences of trying to fit in for me, two of the most socially challenging moments in my life were times when the groups that I was a part of and cared about, my youth group in high school and a retreat group as a young adult, broke into gender fishbowls. Have you ever been part of a gender fishbowl? Where you have folks sit in the middle of one gender and then everybody else is out on the outside, and the people in the middle have a conversation that's not interrupted. They just talk to each other. Maybe they have questions from the other group on the outside, and then you switch. And I just remember this feeling of panic and utter pain that I would be forced to agree to fit the box, to fit into one group or the other. For me, that was a really uncomfortable experience. And my conversation partners, this was all stuff that was so hard to talk about. I'm talking about it in public for the first time right now. It was so hard that I talked about it with my books. I talked about it with Ursula Le Guin and Octavia Butler. I talked about it with Robert Jordan, who imagined gender in these fantastical ways. By my late teens, after I had my first experience of a mental health crisis, of psychosis and a loss of formal identity in the way I had always known it, I came to a feeling of, okay, well, this is me. I remember the first articulation was I was bigenderal, I told a friend, and she said, oh, yeah, we always knew you were a little different, Marcus. I had people in my life who called themselves gender queer, and I thought, okay, that maybe that's it, that identifies and harmonizes my inner experience with others' perceptions of me, that would just let me have something I could identify with and belong. But then I had an experience also in those years, late teen years, with a group called the Radical Fairies. And the Radical Fairies, it's a longer story than I can tell you right now, but they were originally a group of gay men and then evolved into just this pagan gender mishmash. And in that community, in that world, there was a liberating sense of everybody calling each other she, he, they, it. I remember one person, I'm just going to be an it. In a way that didn't feel like we were trying to get it right or find an identity with just the right words that could capture it all, but which felt like we were living together in a land beyond the rainbow, in a place where so much was possible and it was okay that we didn't quite have the words. Or one of them telling me, yeah, Marcus, you can pass until you open your mouth. And I think it was from one of them that I first heard that quote from RuPaul that's now a song, and you're born naked and everything else is drag. And then again, this knowing that there's something more, though. It's not just the all. There's something else going on with these gendered experiences and these long lineages of spirituality and religious traditions telling us there are different paths. I remember, again, even in a queer community, going to a Qigong retreat and being told about the different ways you hold your hand, which hand you hold on the inside, the right or the left, depending on your gender. the conclusion I ended up coming to, and there are a number of more stories I could tell, but the conclusion I came to is that I didn't want or need to battle with the world to be seen in the complexity of my gender experience. I saw other people doing that, other UU ministers, that colleague Sunshine who I mentioned earlier, whose prayer I shared. I saw them doing that, and I saw the way that that became so much of the conversation that they were having with the world. And I didn't really want that to be the whole conversation that I was having with the world. I realized that there were places and people where I felt like I was seen in my complexity, and others where I was just read as a man, and that was okay. I didn't need anything else. It's true, I am. And it's true that I gravitate. I gravitate and feel close towards people and community where, without having to work for it, I feel seen and appreciated in all my weird colors. How do we make more of the world like that? I have a sense that if I were 16 today, growing up where I did, I'd have a lot more language and conversation, not just with books, available than I had 20 years ago. I wonder how that might have impacted my journey towards self-acceptance. And I'm going to read you this reading, a reflection I came across by a pagan, I don't know, but I suspect he's in that radical fairy lineage. Stephen Posh is his name. He wrote, I worry about the sissy boys of the earth. Call us whatever you like, gender non-conforming, non-binary. It used to be that sissy boys got shit from bullies, and from those who, when the world outside doesn't match the world inside their heads, respond from hate. We still do, of course, but now I fear sissy boys face yet another, if different, kind of violence. I was a sissy boy, he says. I liked dolls and dress up and imagining. I wanted to be a dancer. My friends were mostly girls. If you'd asked me, would you rather be a boy or a girl, I could have easily told you. Goddess bless them, my family mostly let me be. It was only outside the home that I learned it was wrong to be who I was. Believe me, sissy boys get shit from pretty much everyone, adults included. That kind of opprobrium is in itself a motivator. Now I worry that sissy boys are facing a new kind of social pressure, not the pressure to conform, but the pressure to transition. If as a child they had offered me hormones and the prospect of surgery, I probably would have taken them. Goddess help me, I would have probably taken them, and that decision would have ruined my life, he says. Why in the world does anyone care so much? Why are they so insistent that we change our bodies or our souls to meet their stupid expectations? We're part of the natural variability of things. Why can't they just let us be as we are? The world is cruel to sissy boys. Many of us don't survive, but let me tell you something about sissy boys, and what I tell you is true. Those of us who do somehow manage to survive the hatred, the bullying, and the well-meaning but ill-considered attempts to fix us are some of the strongest people that you will ever meet anywhere. We are because we have to be. There are many different ways to be a man. Each of us needs to find his own. If you're privileged to be the parent of a sissy boy, lay off. Don't think that you know better than he does. You don't. Just let him be who he is. There's nothing wrong with him, body or soul. Just let him be who he is. So how do we get to that world, that land of all? It was a moment from the Beyond Categorical Thinking workshop that many of you were at that got us here. The moment was the facilitator sharing the story of as a lesbian woman, as a mom, she would always get asked about her husband. You know, who's your husband? What does your husband do? And that sort of assumption is what makes someone feel invisible and undermines their identity and belonging in a community. And I think we've come a long way around making that kind of assumption. My sense is that in our subculture here, in our congregation, in the subcultures that I live my life in, we generally don't assume that someone is married, or if they are, that they are married to a heterosexual partner. And so I wonder if we can move towards that kind of release of assumptions around the entirety of our gender experience. I don't know if we can, but I wonder how we do. I think that the fewer ideas, the fewer fixed ideas about how gender works that you hold, the more capacity for learning and growth and discovery each of us will have for our own lives. Concoct your theories about gender. Notice the ones you inherited, the ones you developed through your own experience, and then remember they're all just theories. Ultimately, I believe that gender is a mystery that will always offer more to be revealed. And then let's be gentle with ourselves and each other around these conversations, especially with those who are living at the edge of the territory that society has approved for gender expression and experience. The children who are embracing the wild gender rainbow world are living into huge unknowns. I have friends who are raising their kids from birth as non-binary, right? They just got born. How would they know what gender they are? Kindergartners in Henry's class invited to introduce themselves with pronouns, to give the whole spectrum of possibilities, at least the third box that we've offered. I worry about us holding on to these boxes, even if we've added a third, instead of expanding the ideas of what anyone of any gender can be. I worry about that practice that is becoming the norm in many of our subcultures of introducing ourselves with our pronouns. Because I don't want to talk about my pronouns. I don't want to label myself with a box on first meeting anyone. I don't want to tell you about this until 5 years into knowing you. We have made a lot of progress. But Gloria Steinem has that quote, she says, though we've had the courage to raise our daughters more like sons, we've rarely had the courage to raise our sons like daughters. And while the range of gender expression that is safer for those born into female bodies has expanded, it has done so more slowly for those born into male bodies. And so that reminds me that the fundamental evil that we're trying to overcome, it's not the gender binary. It's not the ways that we experience and construct gender in ourselves and in relationship. The evil that we're trying to overcome is patriarchy. Is a way of defining gender that keeps an ideal man at the top of the pyramid. That's what we need to keep our conversation focused on overcoming. So, a message for trans kids by Keith Silva to end with. A message for trans kids that I hope is a message for what I think is the trans kid in every one of us. There are many who come before you. We are shining bright, holding you in our warmth. We are working to make the world a place where you can smile, live, and play, and be celebrated. Until then, tend the flame of who you are in your wild, creative hearts. Find us and those who walk beside you Together we will overcome. The world needs your light. May it be so, and amen.